You're not recording it, are you?
It also starts, but I edit it out, don't worry.
Like, are we going to cut off the beginning? Or, I hope we're not. Like, I hope people hear this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Puck short.
Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of the One Puck Short podcast. It's been a while, it's fair to say. It's been 2 years since I did the last episode and it's good to be back, I hope. We'll find out. Delighted today to be joined by a writer for the Athletic and InGoal Magazine, a return guest to the One Puck Short podcast. Please welcome to the show, Kat Silverman. Kat, hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I am doing well, about a month into the season now. I did want to start the show by talking about the good, the people who've impressed us, but I kind of feel like a couple of coaching changes we've seen over the last sort of 72 hours or so flip that on the head a little bit. They're the big stories right now, especially in Chicago. Joel Quenneville out the door. Surprisingly, maybe they haven't had the best start to the year. He was the longest tenured coach at the time. He'd been there since 2008, won 3 Stanley Cups, but the Blackhawks are kind of to start the year. I mean, what's your take on the situation with Quenneville going out, the Blackhawks start to the year, and obviously now Jeremy Collison coming in?
I was actually on the radio in Chicago, I want to say about 2 weeks ago, and they asked me if I thought that Joel Quenneville was on the hot seat this year. And I said that, at the end of the year, unless they were incredible, I thought he was going to be out just because the way that they've reconstructed the roster over the last probably 2 summers, they haven't reconstructed it. They've been floating on sort of living on a prayer that Duncan Keith's not going to regress. Last year he obviously did. Jonathan Toews isn't going to regress. He obviously did. He came back with a surge to start this season, but I think he can't carry them. That Patrick Kane's not going to regress, and then that Corey Crawford's not going to spend half a season with a concussion. And that obviously didn't work, so they didn't really bring in any supporting cast there to help ease the team moving forward. So my assumption was that, they were going to cut bait with Quenneville at the end of this particular season. They obviously did it a little sooner than I expected. I thought at the end of the year, it wouldn't necessarily have been a bad thing because, like you said, he was the longest tenured coach. He's been there for a decade. At this point, I think there's almost a level of complacency. And it's not that I thought that he wasn't caring anymore, but when a coach has been around for a while, through the ebbs and the flows, they can start to rely too heavily on veterans that have served them well in the past. They can rely a little bit too heavily on guys that they know are going to do what they're looking for, maybe to the point where they're not icing their best roster, they're not playing their best system. And they get tired, once the team starts doing poorly, they get tired of losing. It's kind of why it was a best case scenario to see Tippett leave Arizona. I thought it was going to be a best case scenario for, Quenneville to leave Chicago. And then they did it to start November. And that was, I thought, a little unfair to him. I thought it was a little unfair to the team because it sent a message. And I think it was the wrong message because the roster composition is the biggest problem to me.
Yeah,
it
I
really
agree.
it really shouldn't have been a punishment for Quenneville there. It really should have been something else, but as I know Mark Lazarus of The Athletic reported, I've heard it from other people as well. Off the record, now that it's on the record through Lazarus, this is the Bowman team. Scotty and Stan Bowman hold a lot of pull there. They're both still, obviously one's the GM, the other's still heavily involved with the team, even though he lives in Florida now.
Yeah.
If they wanted Quenneville out, he was going to be out regardless. And So whether we think it's fair or not, whether we think Bowman's the one who should have been gone or not, that wasn't going to happen. So realistically, this was coming. Now we see what Colliton can do. I got a chance to talk to him down in Tucson. I want to say it was end of October there. They played a 2-game series against the AHL Roadrunners. Smart guy, nice guy. He was big on delegation. We were talking about there was a bit of an issue with the moorings of the nets for poor Colin Dealey, the starter for Rockford. And he said, The only thing I could control was how my bench reacted to it. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of it. I leave that to the goaltending.
Yeah.
This is how I told my bench to react to it. This is how we addressed it from a bench perspective. And I liked that. He wasn't getting really emotional about it. He wasn't just tossing it aside like, oh, well, the goalie doesn't matter. He was controlling what he could and then leaving what he couldn't to those who could help it. And so I think that's going to be a nice perspective in Chicago. I just feel kind of bad for him because, like we're saying, he's coming into a roster that's kind of in free fall right now. Crawford's not doing well. I think he's not being given a chance to do well. It's not a fun team to watch right now. It's really not. So I don't really know what he's coming into. He's got a tough time ahead of him.
Yeah, and as you said, the timing is odd. Looking at the standings, I mean, the Blackhawks are only like 2 points out of the playoffs. They've got 15 points. Dallas have the second wildcard spot with 17. So it's not like they've fallen way off. Maybe this is just a case of trying to stop a slide. They've lost their last three, so it's trying to stop a slide before it gets out of hand, and they're really in trouble in a tough Central Division. But I mean, their defensive record is not great, and as you said, Crawford's not had the best start to the year. I think he's papered over a lot of cracks for them in the last couple of seasons because he's played so well as guys like Keith and Seabrook, whose contract is just have fallen away, and they've not been able to replace key players on the roster because their cap situation is so tight there. It's crazy, and maybe this is just trying to nip something in the butt before it gets out of hand. Maybe
I think so. I do know that the Cam Ward signing over the summer, a lot of people were kind of confused by that because he wasn't necessarily the best free agent on the market. I've heard that he was the best free agent that was really willing to go to that team because they are, they're kind of a tough team to play behind right now.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a win and a loss for Anton Forsberg. He was their backup last year who became their starter, obviously, when Crawford went down. He finished the year with above a 900 save percentage, which is really all they could have asked of him. He had, I believe it was around a 907. That's what Corey Crawford incidentally has right now. A lot of people didn't like that. They said, that's below league average. That's not good enough. We need someone with NHL experience. Well, they got them. They got Cam Ward. He currently has an 887. So I guess they got what they wanted. I don't know if that's how they wanted it, but, I think they wanted to stop a slide by making a big change like that. I just don't know if they can. And I know that part of that is the roster, They, like you said, they have such tight cap space. They made questionable moves with that. They dealt away Nick Hjalmarsson for Connor Murphy, who's not a top pairing defenseman. Yeah. They could have tried to move Seabrook instead, because clearly the returns that they got for Hjalmarsson were not particularly high. I think they could have tried something there. Hjalmarsson was a favorite of Quenneville's, so I know that was part of the huge rift that they've had the last season or so here. They obviously, the Brandon Saad trade's not really working out super well. He's having a really tough time of it. I don't know if they can stop that slide. That's just one of those things. I don't know if it's possible at this point for them to stop the way things are trending after watching them last year. I know that Forsberg didn't do particularly well, but I don't know if any goalie could behind that team.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the bit that kind of maybe alarms me, is the word. Kane and Taves, to all intents and purposes, have been pretty durable. I know they earn a lot, but you could see them staying healthy. But on the back end, Seabrook's signed till 2024. Keith is 35 years old and still has 5 years remaining, and he's got miles on the clock, and they're visible miles. And a lot of people said that about Eric Stahl, and he was kind of rejuvenated in Minnesota. But because of the term on Keith's contract, that would be a gamble, especially he's got a no movement clause as well. So he'd have to agree to go somewhere. But you don't see like a Tampa Bay swooping in to grab a 35-year-old guy with miles on the clock and term. And to me, don't seem to have a whole lot coming up on the back end through the farm. And as we said, Corey Crawford's just not been quite the same Corey Crawford. I'm going to use opportunity now just to move to the other coaching change we saw with Los Angeles getting rid of John Stevens. They announced that on Sunday. Willie Desjardins, the former Vancouver Canucks coach, is named interim coach of the Kings. Marco Sturm coming in as assistant. But you got to wonder, with Quenneville out there now, whether LA have a rethink maybe on that whole interim coaching tag for Desjardins. They did say if he did well, he might get it permanently, but I mean, Quenneville becoming available shakes up a lot of teams' thinking right now, surely.
Oh, absolutely. I know that in LA things are a little unique because a lot of people forgot, but Daryl Sutter was also fired. He didn't, have his contract expire and then leave. He was fired after 1 year of a 3-year extension. So he's currently in year 3 of that extension, and I believe they're still paying part, if not all, of that deal. And then obviously they're also going to still be paying John Stevens right now. So they were in kind of a tight spot where their team, if we thought Chicago was, they were underwhelming, LA's in a free fall. Yeah. They don't have Jonathan Quick right now. He wasn't doing well when he was up. I believe he has like an 840 save percentage for the few games he did play this year. He's on a second injury for the year. Jack Campbell's doing well so far, but we've never seen him play a full NHL season. So, that's a big question mark. Peter Budaj's like 38 this year. He might be 48. I don't know. He's able to play a ton of games for them. He's getting on up there. So they were doing poorly. Didn't have the goaltending support that you really need when your scoring's not happening. And they were going to be paying 2 coaches regardless. So they needed to find, I believe they needed to find an interim coach there. They needed to find someone who was willing to take just a 1-year thing, because you can't hire another coach on a multi-year deal, a guaranteed coach, and need to fire them because then you're paying 4 coaches. Just keep piling it up like that. So I think they were like, we're gonna take him on as an interim coach, see what happens at the end of the year. Daryl Sutter's contract will come off the books. The interim coach will come off the books, whether they choose to extend him or not. They can move forward only paying John Stevens and whoever the new coach is. So I get why they did what they did. I do think that Quenneville being on the market has to at least give them pause. If they want to ask him, hey, if you wait around at the end of this year, we can offer you big money. Sutter was making, I believe, one of the higher contracts around the league. So they're going to be, it's going to be a massive amount of funds coming off their books that they can then reallocate to a new head coach. But they are going to be competing with, like you said, other teams. The Blues are starting to flail. The Oilers are always kind of floundering. The Ottawa Senators I don't know what they're going to do next. And then there's Seattle. You have to consider what's going to happen with Seattle. Dave Tippett's a good buddy of Joel Quenneville's, so you have to consider that at least there's strong consideration for Quenneville. He was probably called up by Dave Tippett the minute he got fired and said, hey, are you willing to hold out until June or July? And then we can have this talk about you coming to Seattle, building a team from the ground up, which, he'd get plenty of decision-making on that part. He aligns very strongly with a lot of Dave Tippett's views on things, so you wouldn't really have that push and shove that he had in Chicago. So you have to consider that even if teams really want him right now and teams are going to be thinking about it, that's in the back of all of their minds. If we fire our coach, he may not be willing to come on anyway.
Yeah, and I did see on Twitter yesterday, I want to say it was yesterday, that somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they basically said, maybe Ottawa will look at Quenneville. And I think it was Pete Blackburn instantly replied saying, he gets to choose where he goes, right? So, and at this point of his career, he's the second most successful coach in the NHL in terms of wins. Only Scotty Bowman has more. He's kind of earned that right to be a little bit choosy, I would say, at his age and, with those cup rings. But you mentioned St. Louis, that's one I'm kind of almost struggling to get my head around a little bit. And their power play is the 3rd best in the NHL. They've been good at the face-off circle, but they're, again, defensively, they have the 4th worst goals against per game average in the league right now. And they're 27th. And Jake Allen basically described it as rock bottom in a newspaper interview this week.
Yeah, he's I know I have a big mailbag coming out for The Athletic, and people can read more on my thoughts there, but I got asked by like 2 or 3 people about Jake Allen, just saying what's going on there, and I don't know. I can break down what he looks like when he's bad and what he looks like when he's good, but they're 2 completely different guys. And so without his perspective on why he flips back and forth like that, because you don't want to assert any mental ambiguity on the part of a goaltender without knowing, that's not our place to say. without knowing that, there's no way of knowing what's going on there and whether it'll improve, more importantly. So we don't know whether a new coach would fix it. We don't know whether he'll fix it on his own. We don't know whether he can fix it, period. So that's a fun team to watch for people that are not Blues fans, I think.
I mean, I'm kind of wondering at this point if Jake Allen is what everybody thought he was going to be, because, he split time with Brian Elliott, and then Carter Hutton, did pretty well, especially last year. He managed to parlay that into a good deal with the Sabres. But you felt like over the last year or two, Jake Allen, the idea was Jake Allen would stamp his authority on that crease and he would become the Blues' number one goalie. And he just hasn't, to me. I'm starting to wonder if he's... the comparison, because we've already mentioned, is Peter Budaj when he was at the Avs. And it's kind of like, right, Budaj is going to transition and he's going to be our starting goalie. And Budaj became a great backup goaltender, but he never took that step. A lot of people who watched the Avs at the time thought he might take to take the reins and be at least a good starting goaltender. I kind of wonder if Jake Allen's the same thing, where he's a tandem guy rather than the guy.
Right, and I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily.
No, yeah. If it's I don't mean that as negative as it probably sounded, because it worked when Elliott was there and they had that tandem. But I feel like the Blues wanted him to be the guy, and he's just kind of like, well, actually, I'm better with a partner. Maybe that's Husso coming up through the system.
I think part of the problem there isn't necessarily that Jake Allen is more of a tandem guy. It's that the Blues weren't looking for a tandem guy. Because I know that at the draft this summer, with the Avalanche, when they acquired Philip Grubauer, Joe Sakic specifically said when he was addressing the media, he said, we're not in the era of a single starter anymore. He said the games are too hard. The way that goaltenders play is too rough on them. They're incredibly talented, but they can't play like that 82 games a season without getting hurt. And they shouldn't have to. He said, we're moving more towards, you don't want your starter playing more than 50 or 55 games. And that was the first GM that I'd really heard openly say that.
Yeah.
But you get the impression, look at the Coyotes signed Darcy Kemper, who was playing incredibly well in LA. People were wondering if he was going to try his hand at getting a starting gig. He then signed a multi-year extension with Arizona. Obviously, he wouldn't have done that if they hadn't told him, you're going to get a decent amount of starts. We're going to split the crease here. You're not just going to get only the back end of back-to-backs like what Toronto does. I think more and more teams are doing that. They're telling these guys, we're going to split the starts. We're going to make this worthwhile for both of you. And it's going to help them health-wise, I think. And I don't really know why there are teams that aren't doing that, And that's kind of, like you said, that's what the Blues were looking at there. They were looking at Jake Allen as their guy, and then bringing on a backup who could take a few starts here and there. And that may not be what teams should be doing, whether it's what works for Allen or not. Maybe that shouldn't be the question. It should be why the Blues are trying to do that to begin with.
I mean, it's interesting that the Sakic quote, because I know we have our little in-goal group chat, and how many times have we said it, that it's a kind of a 3-goalie league now, where you've got your 1A or starter, you've got your 1B or backup, and then you need that third guy to cover for injuries and fatigue and whatever else. People get sick. It's incredibly difficult outside of, 2 or 3 guys, like Lundqvist and Quick if he's healthy. As you say, they just can't play that many games and maintain that level of performance. Right,
and even if they can, look at what Braden Holtby's doing this year. He's or more importantly, what he's not doing. He's having a bit of a rough start to it, and a lot of people think it's because he's getting tired. And, when we see him get ample rest, when we see his backups capable of taking on more starts, he plays well. And then right now, I think they've only had Phoenix Copley play a game or two. He's playing every single game, and it's showing. And like you said, there are a couple guys that can handle every single game. But even if they can, usually the next season it hurts them. It happened with Freddie Anderson. He did well playing a ton of starts, and then the next year he did well for the first half of the season, and he started to fall off at the end. So I don't think it's smart for any teams to do anymore.
Yeah.
But that's, that may be being cautious about it, but we have enough talent in the league now, I think, to have 2 guys and then have, like you said, that quality developed backup as their third guy too. I think we have enough talent to do that, and so I don't understand certain teams aren't doing it.
Yeah. I mean, Tampa is the one for me, because like last year, Vasilevsky just kind of, I mean, didn't he openly say he was tired? Like, just before the playoffs, he's like, yeah, I'm kind of tired. It's like, this is not what you want your starting goalie to be saying publicly on the verge of the first round.
We do kind of want them to say it, I think.
Well, yeah, no, fair, yeah.
Like, put on him, you know? Somebody had to eventually say it, and I was surprised by who it was who said it. I thought it would be, if not somebody North American, it would be somebody who's known for being open in their interviews and for, you know, revealing a ton about themselves. I thought it would be someone like Antti Raanta or someone like a Braden Holtby kind of guy who's willing to say things that go against the grain a little bit. And then it ended up being Vasilevsky, and, you know, good for him.
Yeah. Yeah, and I, as I say, that's the one thing. I mean, Tampa had this great start to the year. They're first overall. They've won 11 of 15. You know, they're doing that without Palat and Hedman in the lineup. But it's kind of like, is this going to be history repeating, or are they going to cotton on and give Louis Domingue a few more games to ease that load? So, which other teams? We'll get the hot garbage out of the way. We'll get that all out of the way first. Is there anybody else that has stuck out? Any team player who's cold start to the year, shall we call it, has, you know, caught your attention?
Obviously, like we said, Jake Allen, he's having a rough go of it. Mike Smith, good Lord, Smith. He's I try so hard not to rail on him, because we know that I don't particularly care for his style of play.
Yeah.
He, out of his first 10 games, I want to say something like 6 of them, he allowed 4 or more goals. 3 of them, he allowed like 6 or more goals. He has an .871 save percentage. For a little while there, his goals against average, he was allowing over 4 per game. He had something like a 20% quality start percentage. And I think that was because he had 1 shutout, and then he had I think he had a game with a sub 900, but he only allowed 2 goals. He's had a really rough go of it to start. He's currently, of guys who have played at least 5 games, he is last. He's below Jonathan Bernier. He's below Allen. He's below Matt Murray's had a rough start. He's below him. He's below Braden Holtby, Cam Talbot. He's had a rough start. He's below all these guys. He's currently our basement for starters. For Calgary, that's not great, because I don't dislike David Rittich's game, but we don't know whether he can be a starter.
Right. Yeah.
We don't know if John Gillies can be an NHL goaltender, period. We don't know if Tyler Parsons is ready. So that's not a particularly confidence-inspiring crease behind Smith, and he's not inspiring confidence himself. So I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, the Pacific is kind of bonkers at the moment, because the Flames are top, but that's more, which just means their defense has been questionable, shall we call it, to be polite. They've won 4 straight, and their offense is kind of carrying them right now, but at some point you feel like that will drop away, and then it's kind of like, well, when that happens, what happens? I guess the wisdom would be, well, they'll fall away, and then it's but I mean, Smith isn't the first goaltender to struggle under a Bill Peters system either.
That's very true. People keep asking me about that. I don't know how to explain it, because I know it's not the goaltending coaching. The fact that he's now in Calgary, this is his second team, so it's a different roster. It's his third goaltending coach. He had David Marcoux for a while in Carolina. Then he had Mike Bales. Now he has it's Jordan Segale.
Yes.
And so that's his third goaltending coach that he's worked with, and all of the goalies have been bad. There has to be, like, in Mike Smith's defense, there has to be something there that's not just the goaltenders. Like, it has to be something with what Bill Peters does, because I know his goalies struggled at the World Championships this summer as well. Darcy Kemper and Curtis McElhaney were his starter and his backup, and both of them had a not great showing at Worlds. So it has to be something. I don't know what he's doing.
As we said, it's not the first team, it's not the first goalie. It's one of those things. But at some point, as we said, the Flames' offense is gonna cool. I know they've got a lot of. I mean, Monahan was the first star of the week, and Johnny Gaudreau. But they're going to go through a patch where things don't maybe go their way. But kind of on the flip side of that is the Golden Knights, who've had a pretty difficult start to the year, certainly offensively. Their shooting percentage at 5v5 is the worst in the NHL. Their PDO is the worst in the NHL, again 5v5. They're not scoring goals. Max Pacioretty's back. Stastny's about another month away, but I mean, they've come back down to earth with a bump, right?
When you said that, I hadn't noticed just how bad their offense has been. To put it in perspective for the listeners, only one team has scored fewer goals, and it's the Los Angeles Kings. Yeah. And we've what that team looks like right now. And their goaltending hasn't been amazing, but it hasn't been bad. I mean, a couple teams have goals against in the worst is Ottawa. They have 62 goals against already. And
they did concede 9 of those in one game. So.
Yeah. Vegas has only allowed 42 though. Yeah. So that's a significant gap between them and really the basement of the defensive lapses there. I don't know what's going on there. I'll admit I haven't watched Vegas once this year. Their games have happened to come on the same days that I've needed to watch other games, so I haven't seen any of them. So I really don't have any answers there.
Yeah, it struck me just looking at the standings. It's like, okay, well, you kind of know it's been a ropey start to them, but then when you dive in, you see their offense, especially after how well they did last year. Well, they reached the Stanley Cup final, for crying out loud.
It might help them though that they're in the Pacific because, like you said, the Pacific is kind of bonkers. They're leading with just by virtue of goals scored. I mean, they're winning games purely because because their offense is managing to find the back of the net. San Jose belongs at the top, but then Vancouver, they've got to cool off eventually. They're not doing super hot. Edmonton, I'm assuming, will cool off eventually. Maybe they won't. Maybe Connor McDavid will drag them into the playoffs. Arizona got shut out in 3 of their first 4 games, but they're creeping their way back. LA's done for the year, I think. I think they folded. I think the team has folded itself. But that's a wide open division right there. That's a weird one.
Yeah. So if LA are done, what does that mean for the Florida Panthers, who are dead last right now with 9 points? Granted, they've only played 11 games. The Global Series maybe kind of warped that a little bit for them, but how badly do they need Roberto Luongo back?
Part of it. I think, the fact that they're dead last, but they're only 2 points behind LA with 3 fewer games played. And
their PK's got to get better, right? It's like their penalty kill is 68.4% right now.
I know that people have said that these Global Series games can sometimes mess with the teams a little bit, and it does. I mean, travel affects different people differently, obviously, and so the teams that really belong in the basement, I think, are Detroit and LA.
Yeah. And
once Florida plays, I mean, they're 4 games behind Detroit, and they're only 3 points behind them. So let's say, just hypothetical, they win their next 4 games. That's 8 more points. That's 17. They'd be closer to 14th or 15th.
Yeah.
And that obviously requires them winning all of those games, but that just shows how close it is right now. I mean, we're still so early in the season. That being almost, I believe they're 5 games in hand behind a couple teams. Vancouver's played 16 so far. How did that happen? Yeah, Anaheim's played 16 as well. Those are the teams that you need to be more concerned about. Anaheim's played 16 and they're still in 23rd.
Yeah.
That to me is a much bigger red flag than Florida, but
and they gave up 4 goals to Los Angeles, which is an achievement in itself, right?
I was watching that game via Twitter. I was just sort of I was updating periodically to see what was going on, and LA's been really bad. Like, they genuinely look like a team that doesn't care, because I have caught some of their games and they've been appallingly bad. And to have them score 4 goals on Anaheim I don't know how Anaheim let that happen. They're currently ahead of Arizona, but with 3 games in hand, they're only 1 point ahead. I don't think that's going to stay that way. I think give Arizona another game or 2. Even if they catch up, I think they're going to, like in games played, I think they're going to fly right past them, and that's going to become, really, it's going to establish the basement of that division as SoCal, which is kind of sad. They were dominant for a little while there, but I think that's gone, at least for this year.
Yeah, it seems like a painful transition for the Ducks. They said they wanted to get a bit quicker, but guys like Getzlaf they're good players, but they're not maybe built for that kind of game. John Gibson kind of kept them in it for a little while there, but if he's starting to cool off, I think they're in trouble. And maybe Randy Carlisle's in trouble going back to the Quenneville conversation. But let's pull ourselves out of this circle of misery and talk about the teams who have started the year pretty well. I mean, who's impressed you so far?
Vancouver, obviously, they have and I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce it as Elias Peterson or Pettersson, because he made that fun video where he said, pronounce my name like an American. It's Elias Peterson. And then their broadcast team came out and said, don't do that. It's Pettersson. That got shut down really quick. But EP, he's been fantastic. He's been unbelievable. He's, like, we joke about Connor McDavid single-handedly dragging, like, the corpse of Edmonton to the playoffs. The reason that Vancouver has 19 points in 16 games is because of Elias Pettersson. He's been just unbelievably good. And when he's on the ice, you notice it.
Yeah.
And so that team was so hard to watch for so long because they had no direction. And he almost ties it together a little bit. The line that he's on does better. With that offensive relief, their defense has looked a little bit more confident, and I'm sure some of that is also coming from Travis Green and his coaching abilities, but the guys on the ice haven't really changed. They didn't add a ton of high-end skill other than EP this summer, and they definitely didn't change up their defensive roster. It looks almost identical to last year, and it looks noticeably better. So I don't know if it's going to stay that way. I believe they had a hot start last year too, and then didn't just cool off. They froze. But if they keep up the confidence level that they have, I think they're at the very least a wild card contender, which is, good for those fans. They need that. Yeah. Max Domi has looked good in Montreal. I know he is not everybody's favorite person, and there are very valid reasons for that. But good for him in terms of finding his game, because he is a lot of fun to watch when he's doing well. He's the kind of player, he's fast, he's a little antagonistic, he's not quite Brad Marchand, and I don't think he ever will be offensively, but he's got similar,
traits.
He can play a defensive game if he needs to. He can play a physical game if he needs to, because he's short, but he's built like a brick wall. He's one of those really heavy-set, shorter guys who can hold his own on the ice. He can protect the puck if he needs to. He's fast for a guy who's also as strong as he is. So it's good to see him playing well in Montreal, because that ultimately, I think, means that both teams won that trade. And as much fun as it is to make fun of Montreal when they spectacularly sometimes, you grow a little tired of laughing at someone. Yeah. And so it's nice seeing one of their trades work out for them as a good lateral move. Laurent Brossoit in Winnipeg, he's been doing fantastic. I know we've talked about this a little bit in the InGoal chat. He seems very happy to be in Winnipeg, and they seem very happy to have him, which is a win-win. Obviously, Arizona, if you look past their 3 shutouts in 4 games, and not in their favor, they've done remarkably well to start the season. Yeah. Obviously you can't, if every team took away games they didn't like, things would be different. If you take away those 3 games, they have 14 points in their 11 other games so far this year. Excluding their 3 shutouts, they are 7-3-0, which is not a bad start to the season. That's especially after going 2-18-0 to start the season last year. This is a good start.
Yeah, the Coyotes are on my list. I mean, they, as you said, shut out 3 times in the first 4 games, but they won 5 straight prior to Monday's loss against the Flyers. Their defensive record is actually pretty good. They're averaging 2.23 goals against per game, which is the 3rd best in the NHL. Their penalty kill is the best in the NHL. When they finally started to find the net, boy, did they find the net. They went on a great scoring streak. So I'm kind of excited to see what that team can do. I mean, I think I saw Craig Morgan tweet out last night that Antti Ranta had a slight sort of tweak or something in practice. But, I know you and I talked about this last year. If he's healthy, that Coyotes team is dangerous.
And that's, I know that, because we talked about it at practice before they excuse me, before they left for Philadelphia. Ronta started practice. He then left a little early. Just he tweaked something. They took him off as a precaution, especially because they're off today. They're already in Philadelphia, but they're off. They don't play until tomorrow night. I get the impression from everything that we've heard from Rick Tocchet that he's an incredibly cautious coach. He doesn't believe in keeping players in if they've tweaked something, if he doesn't need to. You know, they have Darcy Kemper. He's very good. Really excluding that Flyers loss, which had a couple fluky goals in there. He's been lights out. I get the impression that it's not anything serious with Ronta, but there's no point in pushing through, especially with Kemper playing well. So they called up Aiden, or not Aiden Hill. He's out injured. They called up Hunter Miska. Yeah. And I know that they talked about it with Dakota Mermis. They called him up earlier in the day. They called him up before they left for Philly. Rick Tocchet tries to bring up players as a precaution when they go across the country, because getting someone from the West Coast to the East the day of and expecting them to play isn't something he's fond of. No. Because it's difficult. And so they brought up Miska as a precaution, brought him from Tucson over to Philadelphia. I like that. We were going back to what we were saying about Vasilevsky admitting that he was tired and that being refreshing. Tocchet admitting that a player has tweaked something, and so as a precaution, they're resting him. Yeah. As a precaution, they're not going to make him practice. As a precaution, they're going to bring up someone just so there's a safety net and they're not going to push him through. That's, to me, significantly better than teams that come out and say, turns out he had a concussion for 3 games, but we played him anyway because we need him. So, it doesn't hurt them to hold Ronta out if he's feeling even slightly tweaky. It only helps them because it keeps him healthy longer. So I'm hoping it's just something minor, like I said, but either way, I think it's a good approach by the team, which isn't, like I said, it's a nice change seeing these kinds of things in the NHL. So
yeah, for sure. There's a couple of other names and notes I put down. So the Islanders I had on there, and they'd won 5 straight prior to Monday's overtime loss to the Habs, or shootout loss, sorry. Top of the Metropolitan, but I kind of feel like they're riding the wave a bit here. They've got the highest PDO in the NHL 5v5. Their shooting percentage is also at the top, and Thomas Greiss and Robin Lehner have given them some great goaltending. So I kind of feel like that maybe the Islanders tie into what you said before about the Canucks, the change of coach and the structure that change has brought, especially in the defensive zone. Because the Islanders were awful in their own end last year. It's like a different unit this year. They haven't really had that much change.
I don't think they didn't bring anyone on defensively, correct?
Spisa, they brought in Spisa, but that was more of a depth. Yeah, that was a depth move, but I guess Ryan Pulock being around for the year is a thing. Yeah, it's basically they didn't really make a meaningful change. I don't think Spisa counts as a meaningful change. He's So Robin Lehner came in obviously for Halak, Halak's been great for Boston. I don't think anybody quite expected him to be that good for the Bruins, but he has been. So kudos to him. But the Islanders just. I guess this is what everybody expected Barry Trotz would bring to the team, though. Better organisation in their own end. And so far the offence is, maybe it is performing above expectation. I think even Islanders fans would admit that. Enjoy the ride while it's there, right?
I have to agree with that. It's surprising that the team's doing as well as they are because of who they brought on offensively, especially to replace John Tavares. I expected they'd be doing significantly worse because they replaced John Tavares with Leo Komarov and
Phil Pillar and Matt Martin and
Matt Martin. That's a heck of a punch there. But no, I guess I was underestimating what Barry Trotz can do, and what honestly part of it may be that they want to do well for Lehner and Greiss. I think sometimes we underestimate what a team does to keep their goalie in the game. It's kind of what we see sometimes when the backups are in. People always say, the team plays better in front of the backup. We should just always play the backup. That may not be what's going on here, but I think they, at the very least, want Robin Lehner to win. I mean, it's hard not to root for him. And there may be just that desire to do well for them. And I don't know if it's sustainable. Like you said, there are some teams that may be riding the wave here, but it may partially be, trying to do well for the coach. It may be that the coach has changed up their system. It may be that they're trying to win for their goalie. But that's another team. It's hard not to be happy for them. There are very few teams that I would find trouble being happy for.
There's one other guy I noted is Nathan McKinnon, who's had another great start with the Avs. And what's really struck me is I looked a little further into it, and since the start of last season, Nathan McKinnon has 68 points at 5v5 in 88 games, and that's second to only Connor McDavid, who has 80 in 97 games. He's ahead of Kucherov, who has 67 points in 95. The game differential is what struck me. And he's tied for the lead in goals. He had 33 goals since the start of last season against his 5v5, tied with McDavid and Ovechkin, who've both played like 20 more games. About 10 more games. So it's at what point do we start talking about Nathan McKinnon as like one of the best players in the world? Because I don't feel like we talk about that enough.
That's a good question. I am watching that line. It's kind of funny because that particular line, the Rantanen, McKinnon, Landeskog line, every one of them looks like they're positively contributing, and they look like they read each other perfectly. So I don't know if that is going to help boost arguments that, McKinnon is one of the best in the world, or if it's going to hurt it in the sense that sometimes you just, you get a perfect combination.
Yeah.
It works better than anybody could have dreamed. I think that's at least part of it there, is that combination works so remarkably well because all three of them make the other look better. And I believe I broke down the stats last year trying to make the case for, Taylor Hall versus Nathan McKinnon, which one really should have been the Hart Trophy winner. And I believe that each McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rantanen had slight dips in their numbers without each other.
Right.
Whereas Taylor Hall made every single person he played with better. He was better with regardless of who he played with. And so I think at least part of it is that line is just so perfectly constructed by the hockey gods. Because who could have predicted that? But, it's at least a good chunk of the credit has to go to the players themselves. And you're right. I think I don't know if they'll ever get the credit that they fully deserve because Colorado's not a main market team, which is kind of too bad. I think McKinnon deserves more attention than he's getting, for sure. But I also still think they could get better, which is a little scary to think about. But I think this is not the best we're going to see from that trio. The real question is whether or not the rest of the team can do anything to help them. They have 95% of that team's goals. And then there's one from JT Comper, one from Alex Kerfoot, one from Kyle Soderberg, and then one from Tyson Berry and Eric Johnson respectively. And that's pretty much it. So I don't know if that may also be hurting them, to be completely honest, is they don't have the kind of record that you would expect from a team that has arguably the best line in the league. But they're kind of like the Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, David Pasternak line. It's something similar. It's just one of those perfectly constructed lines that every one of the players is good, but they then elevate themselves to another level entirely just by playing together.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good comparison as well, that Bruins line. And maybe one or two other teams have experimented with the loaded up line, maybe Dallas a little bit with Sagan and Ben on occasions as well. But unfortunately, we've run out of time on on this episode. Kat, what have you got coming up? You mentioned the mailbag there. Anything else in the stream as well?
Yeah, we actually, I have a top super secret article coming out soon, but it's coming out this upcoming week at the start of the week. I can't tell anyone what it is yet, but it's going to be super exciting. So anyone who is a big fan of goalies should keep an eye out for it. That's all I can say.
Cool.
And, I have a couple other goalies that I've got just breakdowns coming up on. I talked to Cal Pickard when he was here in Arizona. I believe I have something coming up on Jake Allen. Bless his heart. We'll have more coming out on Arizona. Obviously, that's who pays me. But yeah, that's really what's coming
Cool.
up here in the immediate future.
Hey, I was a big fan of super secret projects, so
Oh yeah, it's gonna be really fun. I wish I could say more about it, but anything I say about it will spoil the whole thing. So I can only say that I've been like giddy beside myself, waiting to publish this one.